So I'm looking to build a Cyclone dust extractor cheaper than I can buy one. So I'm going to use this bucket here. It's a heavy duty 9 litre bucket, it cost me $4.50. Yes, you'll need a large pail like this. I'll just put it aside for a moment. That I already had, but you can buy them for about $10. Let's have a look at the lid here. You can normally find these pails around the place for free. So the key is this bucket here. It's called a heavy duty bucket. It's just a little bit firmer, but it's still not extremely rigid. We're not talking about a massive home handyman. This is a DIY, occasionally used on my saw. This is a bit of pipe that I already had. I'd probably change it at the end for a longer vacuum cleaner hose. I'll get one from a broken vacuum cleaner. So the parts that I actually need are these fittings here. These are simply screwed together, male and female, 2 of them needed, one for the inlet and one for the outlet, as well as these two, a single 90-degree piece. I also have some 40mm pipe. You can buy that for about $6 a metre, but I have some around my house already. So let's make a hole for these. Firstly, don't need the bucket handle anymore, so we can get rid of that. Probably the easiest thing to do. Got to try and do this without any special tools. Don't even need to measure anything. I've just got some gutter bolts here, 3/16 gutter bolts, because I want the little square nuts that fit into that little track. This fits nicely on top. No measuring, it just fits in very nicely with an even space around. Not critical, don't bother about measuring. First, let's go and get the holes cut in the top of this bucket. Now, many ways we could do it. I'm using one of these cutters. It's very simple to use. You probably don't have one. If you've got a hole saw, use a hole saw. If not, a few hole drills and a trimmer knife. So here, cuts plastic quite easily. Obviously nice and slow and steady. When it hits the bucket, there'll be a bit of a grab. There it is there. But it's okay, slow and steady. Got the safety gear on, we're all good. Let's cut that out quite nicely. Wasn't exactly the center, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't quite fit. It's a little bit hard. So I'm just going to use a deburring tool, quite simply, just to open that up a bit. So a little deburring tool there, used for pipes and holes. Cuts the plastic quite easily, just enough. If you use a hole saw, you may not need to do that. If you use some other method, drilling holes, it's very handy. So I'm just screwing that in so it fits quite nice. I'm not using any silicone, any sealant, any gaskets or anything like that. This is really, truly the simplest way to make one. The second one just has to go on the edge, anywhere on the edge. Here I'm just roughly measuring it. I'm turning the cutter around to the other side so I can make sure I'm as close to the edge as I can get it. Close enough is good enough. No special measurements, no special diameters or anything to here. Once again, as soon as the cutter grips a bit, there's a bit of pressure on there. Bucket, not so bad though. Cut it through, away it pops. Same thing again. That hole won't be quite the right size, so I'm just going to scrape it out with a deburring tool. Yes, mine's an adjustable cutter. I could make it quite a little larger, but it's easy to undercut it and make it a little bit bigger. And then fit that pipe in nice and snug. As it's a male to female, there is a flange. So even if you're a little bit oversized, when you put these parts on the inside, you can see there's a little bit of a flange there. It will hold it and hold the pressure quite nicely. Now it's just a matter of tightening those up. I'm just doing them medium tightness for now. I'll come back later on and give them a bit of tightening up. Just making sure they do seat nicely. There's no burrs or anything holding them so the air can leak out. Makes a quite nice seal. A little bit of leaking here isn't critical in here. In fact, it can actually help it. So let's just screw those up. Just hand tight. And that's probably the hardest part done. Now for the fiddly part. Oh, cutting a pipe. So here's the pipe I had. I've got a set of these cutters here. If you don't, whoops, there it goes on the floor. If you don't have one of those bits, you can just use a saw. I have a saw up there, I could have used that. Put it together. I'm not gluing this. No need, there's no pressure on this. As long as the 90 degree is against the side of the bucket, swirling around. So all the dust will come in, swirl around and drop down. That's the top of the Cyclone done. Now we're going to join it to the lid. move some tools out of the way, make some space. Once again, simple, easy, not going to measure anything at all here. In my mind, I'm thinking about 8 nuts and bolts to hold it on. Nothing special here. Just place it on, center it roughly in the center. Need to get a drill of roughly the right size. Drilling through plastic. They're 3/16 gutter bolts. So let's just go and see if I've got a drill bit the right size. There's going to be some give and some take in this. So as long as when I measure it up, it's slightly oversized. That looks good. Just a little bit bigger. Let's get drilling. First hole I will drill through, put the bolt on and fasten it on just to hold everything in place while I do some more. Notice I haven't done any measuring, just wherever I grab it, through I go. The beauty of using the 3/16 screws and the square gutter bolts is that there's the lip of the bucket. The lip is just the right width that those nuts will fit in there and be held quite tight. So don't put the bolt through from this side. Flip it over and put the screw through that way. Or the panhead bolt if you want to be more precise. Once again, I've chosen a drill bit. That drill's slightly undersized, so there's a bit of grip there. Put it through. Grabbing the nuts. Now they're always at the bottom. Tip them out. All you need to do is the 3/16 square nuts are the same size as the little flange in there. They friction fit inside of there. So I just simply push the square nut down over where the partly showing screw is. Once you've got that there, they don't fall out. They're held in place. It's a simple matter of picking the bucket up. Remember, I've already put the screw through from the other side. And simply doing it up. The black bucket will hold it very nice. You can tighten it down just until it's a little bit, it grabs and it's a little bit tight. And that's one done. The bucket's held on. I can kind of center it around a little bit more, go roughly opposite, and drill my second one. Once I got these two in, it'll be quite firm. This is simple repeating this 6 more times. So in total, I'm doing 8. The last one's a little bit tight, so I'm just giving it a little bit of a wiggle around there to give me a bit more room so it's a bit easier to get in. Simply going to poke the screw through the hole again. Once again, the hole is still a little bit smaller. It's grabbing onto it. Force the square nut down in the flange. Try not to drop it. But once you ram it in there, it does fit quite nice. You could go ahead and do the rest of them now, but I'd just like to get this one tightened up, and that way the bucket will be held on in the right place. So repeat that process. That's all there is to it. The bucket holds the bolts really well. Right now it's being held by 2. I just go round and drill all the rest of the 6 holes. There is a little bit of a gap between the bucket and the top of the table. So notice I haven't put any sacrificial scrap that I'm drilling into. I'm just simply drilling through the plastic and stopping, and there's about a 2 centimetre gap between the bottom of the bucket and the top of the bucket, so I'm not drilling to my desk at all. I'm not measuring anything. There's nothing critical here. Once that's done, you see I've got the 6 more holes there. Rinse and repeat. I've just evenly spaced them around. No particular measurements. Going through and doing that. So, off we go. Get that done. It's held down, and that will do. that is just about the cyclone finished. All these screws are nicely tightened up. Just hand tight, nothing special about anything there. It's time to cut the large hole in the top bottom of the lid. I find it much better to do that, just tweaking those bolts again. It's much better to do that afterwards because everything's nice and rigid and holds in. And there's no need to try and cut anything or try and measure anything. Once again, I'm just going to use a spade bit. You could use a hole saw, the same hole saw you use for the roof. It doesn't really matter. All I need is a big hole, enough to get a blade in there. Once you've drilled your large hole in there, just make sure it's somewhere in the middle. If you don't have any other tools, any special tools, I'm using a hook blade. You see it's just a normal Stanley type trimmer blade with a hook. Now these containers are quite heavy, so it's quite hard. You can take your time and you can get around. But I'm quite lucky I do have a jigsaw. So instead of struggling with this and being concerned that I might catch my hand or something, I'm going to use a jigsaw. A little trick I'm going to use here with my jigsaw though is I'm a bit concerned that the blade going in and out may damage the inside of the bucket if you get too close to the edge. So here you can see on my jigsaw blade, the blade I'm using isn't an aggressive timber blade, but it still could do the damage. What I mean by that, I mean as I'm trying to get as close to the edge as possible, it's very easy for the blade to hit the edge, scratch up the edge, cause a weakness. So I'm just putting some tape on the end of it, just some simple masking tape. That way if it rubs against the edge, it's not going to scratch and gouge and possibly cause holes in it. Doesn't really matter how much you put on, just enough to stop it from scratching through. You see, there's enough of the blade there that's going to cut. I'm simply going to cut through here, just take my time, not going too close to the edge. Speed that up for you there. You can see it's a beautiful cut, just rough and ready. Now I'm going to use that same actual cutter, a hook cutter, because I want to get that nice and clean, a little bit wider. It doesn't have to be perfect to fit exactly inside. In fact, if it sticks in a little bit, gives it a little bit extra strength for the lid. But I'm just going around scraping so it's nice and even. Don't try and dig too deep. That was a very deep cut. Just slide it on and take off a little bit at a time. If there's a high spot, just slide it on. We'll spend about 30 seconds going around and just doing that. So nice and slow and steady. Notice my hand's at the top of the bucket, the blade's at the bottom, so I'm not going to damage myself if it does slip. And all we're doing is just removing some of that, making it somewhat round, but once again, there is no measurement, no need to be perfect. Once we went around a couple of times, that'll do. It'll be a nice clean edge, but there's still a bit of extra material in there to give it the rigidity, to help hold it nice and flat. Not perfect. It will do nicely. That's all I needed to do. And that is the Cyclone completely finished in probably under than 10 minutes. So let's have a look at how it works. Firstly, this isn't a super duper shop vacuum. This was the cheapest vacuum I could find in any shop nearest me. $40, quite simple, quite cheap, nothing special. It's a bagless, so I don't have to worry about that. It comes with its own little hose. I'm going to hack part of that off. And this is the little guy here. So convenient. It's got a small container. So that's why I want this Cyclone, so I can fill up a large bucket before I have to keep on emptying every 5 minutes. Now, it's bagless, so that makes it easy. It doesn't lose too much suction. So I want to keep as much dust and grit out of there as possible so it doesn't overheat and run too hard. So let's just put this guy together. I'm going to take apart this end of the hose. I want to make it so I can still attach it on if I want. But how does it work? So here's it working. I have to put the Cyclone part on the bench. See the bucket's on the floor there. Take it off And I'm just putting onto the desk is nice and smooth, so it'll actually fit there quite nicely. So it's just sitting on the bench, nothing magic. So you turn it on. I've got a tray full of dust here from an earlier job on my circular miter saw. So it's just taking all the miter saw shavings, including a few bits of offcut, out of there very, very easily. There's no real loss of suction on the vacuum cleaner. You can see that worked quite well. If you have a look in the bag list, you can see there is some going through. I'd say less than 10%. So that means here that all this stuff is going to go into the bucket. So let me put that back in the bucket there. You can see it fits quite easily. Let me just move the tray out of the way. As I'm vacuuming this up, you can see the bucket moves because it's suctioned shut. It's not going to tip over. Very easily picks up all those scraps there, all the dust, everything there. If I want to do a better job, I'd put on the vacuum cleaner extension that came with it. I've just used a pipe fitting to make that work. But you can see it gets just about most of it up there, just some dust left on. As I said, I could brush it off. There's a small bit in there, but as you can see, this bucket will hold probably most of a day's job working for me. Just wait for the vacuum to clear, and there you've got it there. So very little dust has gone through into the actual vacuum cleaner. Please like and subscribe so I can do more of these. Thanks everybody, I'll catch you around.